Hi, everybody. I'm Maddie Skousen, as you know, and I am doing a book review on Play Like a Pirate by Quinn Rollins. So let's get started. Okay, so just to summarize the book, he divides the book up into three different sections. Section 1 is about toys, Section 2 is about games, and Section 3 is about superheroes, graphic novels, and comic strips. And honestly, I I thought it was really fun. So in each section, he just goes through and he just talks about how you can incorporate toys, games, and superheroes, graphic novels, and comic strips into your teaching. And he has a lot of great ideas. So, like for example, toys, he talks about action figures, Barbies, Legos, and then he gives relevant examples about how you can incorporate those things into your teaching. And so on and so forth. He does that for games as well. He talks about board games. He talks about how he has created his own board games in order to teach a historical event that has happened or some concept in history. And his ideas are just super fun and engaging. They allow him to play with his students, as well as teach them and to interact with them in a fun and memorable way. And of course, in the last section, he talks about superheroes, graphic novels, comic strips, and I mean superheroes, super relevant. Most students know all about superheroes, their background, their superpower, and incorporating that into historical events or historical figures is a really fun way to engage students, as well as graphic novels are just fresh way to look at history. It's basically a comic book, but it's nonfiction. And so, like for example, I just recently read a graphic novel about Frederick Douglass, and it was in first person. And with the images and the text, it was a really engaging way to learn about about Frederick Douglass and his life, and um, about the Civil War, and about life of a person that was enslaved. And it was just really engaging and fun. So he talks about using those, incorporating those in your lessons, as well as comic strips. Comic strips definitely bring funny commentary to events that have happened in history, and it also allows students to be creative and create their own comic strips. And so I just loved how he said that, I mean, you can either create your own toys or your own games, or you can play with already existing toys and existing games, but he gives hundreds of ideas about how to incorporate that into your teaching. So I thought that was, that's basically what the book was about. And some strengths and weaknesses. So, I mean, strengths of the book, it was a really easy read. His tone is very lighthearted. He's very funny. His personality definitely shines through. And you can just tell that he's so passionate about teaching, that he loves it so much. And so that was really fun. The book in itself was very fun to read. It didn't feel like, an assignment or a burden. And another strength is it's super relevant to teaching today. And it gives, like I said, hundreds of ideas and creative things to do in your classroom that will engage your students and allow them to not only have fun but to use their creativity, to use their imaginations. And by doing so, they are going to remember the things that they have learned so much easier. They will remember what you have taught them, and your relationship with them, I think, will be so much better as well. He just talks about how much fun his students has in his class, and how much fun he has in his classroom. And so overall, it's just a plus plus, a positive, fun community in the classroom for sure. Weaknesses, I honestly, like, I don't have a lot of critiques for this book, but just for the sake of saying that there's some weaknesses, it's almost overwhelming how many ideas he incorporates into the book. It's kind of hard to know where to start when it comes to unit planning and lesson planning. There's so many things that we could do. And so it's just going to be, trial and error, just figure out timing and what's going to be best for your class and what's going to be most relevant and most helpful and most engaging. And so that's going to be a little bit difficult, as well as, my classroom isn't going to be like his classroom. And so it's just going to be finding out what works for me and my students. So that's the only critique I have for the book, is it's just almost too, almost there's too many ideas in that book. It's overwhelming. So application in the classroom, I just loved how many ideas he had. And he is a social science teacher, and so most of his ideas were centered off of social sciences. However, he also tells you how, these ideas can be incorporated into science classrooms as well as math and English. And so it's really applicable to any teacher and to any subject. You can always incorporate fun into your lesson planning. And so, yeah, all of the ideas were really easy, really relevant, and really engaging. And so I think that they're definitely some things that, we can incorporate into the classroom that are a lot more fun. And, he had a lot of gifts. The two gifts that I thought stood out to me were the action figures and also the trading cards. The historical action figures were just, you let your students choose a figure in history, and they get to either draw or make a 3D version of the action figure, and they make their box that they come in. And so on the box, you give a brief background story or a brief biography of that figure, and then you list off their strengths and their weaknesses, and a little bit about the time period that they lived in. And I think that this is super fun, because you can also, put a spin on certain characters. Like, for example, in the book, he said, Harriet Tubman, what would she be like as a ninja? And that makes sense. Like, she kind of was a ninja. She definitely was sneaky and was able to sneak, and free a ton of people that were enslaved and make it to safety into Canada or into the northern United States. And so students will be able to use their imagination and be able to, reimagine historical figures in a different way. And I also loved the trading cards idea. It's like flashcards, but you make them more like Pokemon cards or like baseball cards. And you make them have value, like each historical figure or an event in history, they have value, and you can trade, classmates can trade with one another. They can put certain historical figures in different contexts. So you can imagine what would happen if Abraham Lincoln was president during World War II as opposed to the Civil War. Like what would be different or what would be the same. And so you can just use historical concepts, but the kids, they won't just, memorize a fact and then throw away the card. Now they're using that card that they had learned earlier in the year, later in the year. So they're still thinking about concepts that they learned previously, but putting them into new scenarios and imagining different things, and vice versa. A current figure, what would Ronald Reagan be like in the revolutionary time? What would be his strengths, or, what disadvantages would he have with his historical or with his political thinking and thought process and his policies as president. And so you can just use those types of ideas to get kids to think in a different, creative way. And so I thought that was a really cool and fun idea. Overall, I just, like I said, loved the passion that he has for teaching and the love that he has for his students. And he just really encourages teachers, just whatever obsessions, whatever hobbies, whatever passions you have, don't be afraid to use those in the classroom. Let your students know how much you love them, how much you love teaching, how much you love the subject that you're teaching and the subject that they're learning about. And just to remember to have fun. I think that's the most important thing, is if you're having fun, your students are most likely having fun in the classroom as well. So my takeaway from the book is bring on the passion, bring on the love for teaching, and bring on, the fun for the subject, that you're teaching, and also have fun with your students. Don't be afraid to be yourself and to let your personality shine through in your teaching. And that is everything. Have a wonderful day.